Hello and welcome to the Iraq Football Podcast, ladies and gents. It's not been an amazing day for Iraqi football. Losing to Iran is never easy. But alas, we are through to the next round. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. I'm joined here by Hassan Osama, and we're going to be discussing all things related to Iraqi football, including today's loss, alongside recent fixtures with Hong Kong and Cambodia. We're going to be taking our mind all the way back to the start of Group C. What was it like in terms of our expectations at the start of the group? Where do we find ourselves today? How does Katanec fit into our future plans? And we're also going to be joined by Arya from GolBezan, and we'll be looking at how Iran beat us in this, let's say, tight fixture, because it was not an easy game for them, nor was it our best performance. We'll start off with Hassan. Hassan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I was hoping for better circumstances to record our next podcast, but in any case, we're through to the next round and happy to be discussing the situation.
Well, there's a lot to discuss, and I'm sure we've got a lot of different opinions on what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, what we can expect over coming weeks and months, maybe even the year if we get that far enough and we still have hopes of qualifying. Let's start off with today's fixture, Iraq-Iran. Hassan, I'm sure you're disappointed, but what do you think of today's performance?
Yeah, so honestly, it could have been worse as far as I'm concerned. Defensively, it was a lot of the same as what we saw in previous games, where pretty solid defensively, aside from the one lapse where we conceded. But we weren't super troubled. Jalal was quite good for when they did receive chances, but the real concern and the real trouble was, again, the theme of basically this entire round, where we can't create any chances. As soon as we have a chance to counter or a chance to attack with the ball, we really struggled. So that's been a theme for a while, and it's a problem that will need to be solved if we're going to do anything in the next round.
So the key thing for us is that Iraq are actually through. Fortunately, we, thanks to other results across the different groups, we managed to qualify as one of the top 5 second best teams in Asia. Now, as I said in various tweets and the Twitter space that we had, shout out to everybody that joined. That was great fun doing it with you guys and discussing the games as they were happening live. If there was any game that I would want to lose against Iran, and there really isn't, but if I had to choose one, it would have been today's game, mostly because it was a dead rubber. The chances of Iraq not qualifying in this set of fixtures were very limited, thanks to the tough fixtures other teams faced. So for us to lose and not make it to the next round, we'd had to have seen the likes of Saudi lose, Australia lose, South Korea lose, and Syria lose to China. So the game really is a dead rubber. It would have been nice to beat Iran, obviously, and beating Iran is always a big thing for us, given the rivalry and the political, religious, cultural rivalries amongst other various things. So it would have been nice to have won, but given that we lost, this is the match I want us to lose. But there were so many things to take away from this fixture in terms of things to be concerned about, things that actually we did all right in, and just areas for discussion, if I'm honest with you. Well, let's start off discussing some of the things that we were impressed with, Hassan. You mentioned some of the defending. I think you're right on that. I think the defence generally looked good. I think as well the midfield in its own half looked promising. Safa looked quite good at breaking up play. I think Amjad Atwan had a particularly good game. He brought a lot of energy to the team. But where we really struggled is an area that we've been discussing for the entirety of the last 2 years, the entirety of Group C, which is going forward, the lack of creativity in our attacking side. So, when when the players like Mimi or Bashar tried to actually create something against Iran, they were isolated. They were out on the flanks, unable to bring the ball down. They were basically covered in the Iranian defense. Like Bashar would get the ball, there'll be three players on him in an instant. Mimi the same. I don't think the stadium helped. The pitch looked terrible. The conditions of the weather were tough, but we didn't help ourselves either. Every time Mimi got the ball, he was isolated. Every time Bashar got the ball, he was isolated. I think the players themselves also looked weak in terms of holding the ball up. I think the IQ in terms of the players' intelligence with the movement, where to move with the ball, when to release, when to shield the ball, etc. All of that left a lot to be desired, and that's one of the key reasons I was frustrated today, because I really think Iran were there for the taking. I don't think Iran looked particularly good. Our friends from GolBezan might disagree with me on that. I think the only difference today was that Iran had a bit more quality up front, with Zadar finishing the chances, and there was some good build-up play that managed to find space between our otherwise well-organised defence today. We approached the game 5 at the back. We started off with Jalal Hassan in goal, Ala Amhawi. The defence was Saad Natiq, Ahmed Ibrahim, as we've come to expect, and they were joined by Maitham Jabbar, Ali Adnan on the left fullback position. There wasn't no real surprises. I think that's as strong a defensive lineup Katanec could have chosen. The only maybe issue there was maybe you would have thought Durgham would start, given how little football Ali Adnan has played due to visa issues with Vancouver. But that was the lineup we went with. And then in midfield as well, you have Safa and Amjad holding players, and Humam on the right as well, who tracked back a lot, and I think generally he had a decent game compared to what we've come to expect from him. So it was a defensive setup. Katanec clearly set up the team to maybe get a draw, or maybe you might even argue damage limitation. But despite that, I think we started very well. The team passed the ball well. We generally stopped Iran from actually finding many gaps in the first 30 minutes. There was one scare that they had early on, but somehow that was cleared. And the first real instance was their goal. Now, if you watch that goal carefully, Ala Amhawi is not even in the picture. The ball goes down the right flank for Iraq's defence, the Iranians' left side, as they attack. The ball goes over the midfield, and Humam is bombing it back, trying to track back. The Iranian player gets there, the winger, simple pass back. Sadar has a simple tap in to finish, and Iran take a pretty much undeserved lead. Up until that point, it was all Iraq. Iraq looked the better team. We passed the ball a bit better than they did, but the biggest problem was going forward. We couldn't create anything. The only real opportunity we had early on was a penalty appeal, and I'm really certain that was a penalty, because I think it was Bashar that takes the shot. Hassan, was it Bashar?
It was either Bashar or Safa.
Well, look, somebody takes a shot from outside the box. It hits a defender's arm inside the box, an Iranian defender, and the hand was in a very abnormal position. So usually FIFA's understanding of the handball rule is, if a player's hands remains in his natural body silhouette, is how they describe it. So with his hands by his side, in a natural position, that would not be a handball. But the ball struck his arm in a very unnatural position, with his arm up, as if it was outstretched. And it clearly deflects on it, inside the box. How this is not given as a penalty is beyond me. The Uzbek referee, how he justifies not giving that penalty, I'm not too sure. I'd be very intrigued to see what his match report says. But for me, that should have been a penalty. That would have been a goal, and that would have given Iraq a comfortable 1-0 lead going into the rest of the first half following that moment. But, football's football. Sometimes things don't always go your way. And unfortunately, we never really looked like scoring following that opportunity. Like I said, Iran took the lead in the first half. Second half, we had a good chance with Bashar shooting straight at the keeper right after the game restarted. But other than those two instances, we never really looked like scoring. How do you think we did going forward, Hassan? Like, do you think I'm being too harsh, or do you think actually that's a fair assessment?
No, as far as I'm concerned, that's quite fair. It's you mentioned it already. The isolation of our forwards, Mohamed, Bashar, and it's pretty much just them today who were trying to create anything. They would go up in attacks, and there's no one to play off of. There's no combination play in attack. It's literally just they get the ball and try to create something from nothing. Which when you're playing against a team like Iran, it's not going to happen. It's very, very tough. So, and this has been the case, like, regardless of the level of our opposition, which is alarming in my opinion. Was like when it happens against Iran, I'm not like again, like, you're playing against a great team, but when it happens against Hong Kong, when it happens against Cambodia, then you have big problems in my opinion. Like it's an issue that I have a hard time blaming it on the quality of our players in this kind of case, because if you look at the other members of our group, Bahrain, for example, they played against Cambodia and beat them 8-0, while we really, really struggled. Like, we made it to a 4-0, but like 4-1, conceding a goal against them, and we labored there again. And they played against Hong Kong today. They cruised to a victory against them. We made it through with an own goal. So it's a big problem, and I think it's going to be a problem on the part of Katanec. I like the way how he set up the team defensively, and it's a stable performance generally, from game to game. But the attacking phase, it's just not good enough how it is, and I think he is the one who should be taking responsibility as far as setting the team up in an attacking sense. And that's the biggest weakness that we've faced so far. We barely looked like we were going to score today. There was the penalty appeal, but then you're not going to get every call from the referee, and you can't rely on these things. And then as well, like, we had some chances, but the shots were never good enough. But like, they weren't ever like 100% this should be a goal throughout the game.
They were half chances.
Yeah, exactly. Like, same thing against Hong Kong. We could have played that game forever, and I wouldn't feel like we were gonna score. It was really tough to create anything, even against them. So
I think right now I'm in a lot of different thoughts, and I think you're gonna see this as this podcast progresses, because I've got so many different thoughts and so many different things to say, and the lack of cohesion in this podcast, you'll notice it by the end that I've just gone and scattered my different thoughts here. But I really wanted to record this podcast because there's so much to be said and so many different opinions, and I wanted to just share my thoughts and give people time to actually reflect on what's been quite an interesting couple of months. So I want to take us back right to the beginning of Group C. We were grouped together with Iraq, Iran, Bahrain, Hong Kong, and Cambodia. Now, when we saw that group, Hassan, if I told you we're going to finish second with 17 points, 1 point less than Iran, plus 10 goal difference, and we'd have beaten Iran, we'd have beaten Cambodia twice, we'd have beaten Hong Kong twice, and we'd have only lost one game, don't you think you would have taken that?
it like that, I would take it. But at the same time, about second place is what I would have been expecting at the time. Like, you know, if I put myself in the mindset of right before the group stage had been played, I would have said Iran goes through top just because of the quality of their players, and second place would be between us and Bahrain, and that's basically how it came out. Aside from the fact that we could have taken the first place, I wasn't expecting Iran to be as shaky. But yeah, I would have taken it. But then the thing is, like, if you look at it this way, just based off of the numbers and based off, like, you know, on paper, it hides a lot of the weaknesses that our team showed. It's the same idea of like of when we were looking at our unbeaten streak, where on paper it looks good. Our ranking is better than it pretty much ever has been, but there are big weaknesses in the team that these numbers they don't show.
What if I tell you that we're complaining about the lack of goals in this Iraqi team, but actually, if we're to look at the group as a whole, there were only 2 games that Iraq failed to score in. So Iraq versus Bahrain, we played that at home. I say at home with quotation marks because it wasn't really at home. And today, those are the only 2 games out of 8 where we failed to score. Does that not tell us that we're being a bit harsh in our assessment?
Again, like when we look at these things, like you have to also take in, you know, consideration who are we playing against. And I mean, yeah, it's good that we're through to this next round. Of course, I would always take that over the alternative. But like, if you're comparing, we have to compare ourselves. Like, it's not just that, we scored in every game, but then so did everyone else, basically. As far as I know, our scoring record, I would have to look at our group again, but I would be shocked if we had a better goal difference than Bahrain, and certainly we have a weaker one than.
So just to put things into context, Iran scored 34 goals, but 24 of those came against Cambodia, so that is slightly deceptive. Iraq scored 14, and Bahrain scored 15, so Bahrain scored more than us. Each Iraq, Iran and Bahrain only conceded 4 goals each. But Bahrain scored 8-0 against Cambodia. So Bahrain overall were much of a less attacking threat than we did. I think these stats are deceptive. Cambodia being in the group really messed things up a little bit in terms of how good each team was going forward. If we look at Iraq's goals with the Cambodian goals excluded, we scored 14 goals and 8 goals of those came against Cambodia. So take that away, you're left with only 6 goals in 6 games against the likes of Iran and Bahrain and Hong Kong. And remember, Hong Kong, as much as we want to pretend they're a difficult team, they're really not. We scored only 6 goals. That's averaging 1 goal a game. That's not amazing, and it's not the kind of stats you want to see from a team that has hopes of qualifying for the World Cup. Hassan, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, in a vacuum, just looking at the stats by themselves, say like, okay, we scored in pretty much all of our games. Sounds good, but the reality is that it's pretty misleading, and compared to the teams that we're competing against, it's our tally isn't anything special at all. And yeah, as we mentioned, like Bahrain scored even more than us, like by 1 goal more than us, and they're not through in the next round. So you know, we have big problems attacking, and even like the numbers can look a little bit better for us, but they might show a certain picture, but the reality on the pitch is something else, and it's a big problem.
Okay. Assuming Katanec stays, which is very unlikely given what we're reading, it's quite likely. In fact, I'd be very surprised if this isn't Katanec's last match for Iraq. There was a lot of rumours prior to the game talking about Katanec has not received over 5 months worth of wages. That's frustrating for any employee, and it's understandable for Katanec to be quite frustrated with that. But from an Iraqi perspective, as an Iraqi fan, would you want Katanec to stay on, Hassan? And where do you see Iraq going? Let's discuss that first, actually. Then I'll come to the second question. What do you think of Katanec? Should he stay or should he go?
So the way I approach this is, it's not that so much like you're looking at how good of a coach is Katanec. It's more, what's the alternative? The reality is that I don't think that we're going to get someone better than him. As I see it, if he leaves, we're going to get another Iraqi coach. I don't know the kinds, like the category of Basim Qasim, that kind of thing, where we've seen what we can do with those coaches, and it's just it's not good enough. I was not impressed with basically any of our previous Iraqi coaches. We had some decent stretches like Asian Cup 2015 with Ali Shnashid, but over the long run, it's not that good. And as over the last years, and I think his in terms of win record and all the stats, Katanec is among the best coaches that we've had record-wise. And of course, he has his issues, but the thing is, if I criticize his attacking, him on the attacking end, but defensively, I don't think our team has ever looked more stable or defensively sound than with him in charge. I think there's a number of problems in this, especially in this current environment, like in Bahrain, and they're under quarantine, and then also the way the last training camp in Basra went for him, which he complained about in his press conference today. There's a number of issues that compounded all together, which led to our lackluster performances in these last few games. And I just don't see that another Iraqi coach put in the same situation would have done any better than him. So that's just how I see it. Personally, I would prefer to hang on to him, because I like having the consistency. I remember in the past, we would be going through coach after coach after coach with the national team, and I just don't think that that's conductive to having a good national team that can compete. And I think it's better to hang on to him. He has his problems, but it's better to continue with the guy that his weaknesses, and that it's possible that we can work forward with it. So
Ali Nouri, who works for I think it's Iraqi Sport. I've seen him a few times as well on what's that program called, the Qatari one. Anyway, he's come out and said that Katanec for sure will not continue as a manager for Iraq, and they're looking to bring in an international coach, or as they describe it, a great international coach that's well known and popular. Obviously, Iraqis or the Iraqi FA have always gone about blagging about that. There were talks previously of the likes of Maradona, Sven-Goran Eriksson, etc. All of these guys taking the managerial role. We ended up with less famous managers. In our case, Katanec. Now, interestingly about Katanec, if he had avoided a loss today, he would have equalled Iraq's all-time record of an unbeaten run. It would have been 20. He would have matched that, but his was only 19. The question for me that I still have over Katanec after this number of years with him as our coach is, yes, we look good defensively, but is that because he's sacrificed so much from Iraq going forward? Or is that just because he's a very limited coach in terms of he knows how to teach a team to defend, to become organised, but he lacks the ability for us to actually attack, and he doesn't know how to coach or to organize a team in order to operate in an effective manner like that. The fact that after this long with Katanec as our manager, we're still struggling in such an important area of football really leaves me wondering whether he is the right man for us. So, yes, we look. If you watched Iraq 3 or 4 years ago, we were honestly laughable. Like as a national team, we were a joke, and that's reflected in the FIFA rankings because we used to play against teams like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and they would rip us apart. Literally, one ball down the middle, and the midfield is non-existent. Now, we've been lucky to have players like Safat come through, Amjad Atwan really developing. Um, you have other midfielders that have kind of found a spot in the national team, and maybe we didn't have the same quality back then, but the way we play now is a much more organized and systematic structure, and that's made us harder to beat. But going forward, we are atrocious. Like let's be honest, we cannot break teams down unless we get lucky through a defensive error or the player scores something out of nothing through their own sheer determination or a bit of magic. So I'm thinking like Amjad Atwan's goal against Cambodia or that last minute header from Ala Abbas against Iran. These are not goals that you score through creative play like the same way we conceded today. Like Iran's goal today, that came about from good movement, good attacking football, and just high quality IQ and good tactical football. They passed the ball well. They managed to run at our defence. They created angles for each other, and they managed to slice open our defence. That's good quality football. When's the last time we saw Iraq score a goal like that, where we passed the ball well and just ripped the team apart? I actually can't remember the last time I saw that. It's been so long. Just to go back on another example of a goal that we've scored where it's been through like either luck, for example, Mimi scoring against Yemen where the players made mistake after mistake, or Muhammad Qasim's goal against Qatar where he scored a rocket. That these goals, you can't win every game with those goals. Not every team's going to make a mistake. In the next round, we're going to face much harder teams. You're not going to be making the same mistakes, or they're not going to be making the same mistakes. You're not going to be able to score like that. And the fact is that we still struggle to break down teams. It's worrying. It's worrying, and I don't know how we're going to manage it going forward. And this is one of the reasons I wouldn't be too upset to see Katanec leave. I think he's done a good job, but I think we've gone as far as we can with Katanec. We need somebody with new ideas, new outlooks on terms of how to attack other teams. Maybe somebody who's going to look to bring in some of the expat players. Like today, we're looking at that team, and there's no real attacking intent. We had Bashar, we had Mimi. Mimi looked tired, if I'm honest with you. He looked like he didn't want to be on the pitch. And he's looked like that the last 2 games as well. Bashar's Bashar. His quality, but there's only so much one player can do on his own. And I'm looking there thinking, what, you're telling me that expats wouldn't improve this team? You're telling me the likes of Amir Al-Amari is not going to bring any new dynamics to this side? The likes of Jilwan, the likes of Justin, who I think would have been a huge asset to have today. Somebody to run at the opposition players, something we lacked today. We had no real runners. Off the bench, we brought on Muhammad Qasim for 5 minutes. No time for him to do anything. Brought in Ibrahim Bayish. I don't think Bayish has had a good game for us in about a year and a half. We brought on Ayman Hussein, if I'm honest with you. His level is playing against the likes of Nepal and the Iraqi League, and the Iraqi League is so far off the standards required on a national level, especially on the 3rd round of the Asian qualifiers, that he's not what we need. He's not what we need. Ala Abbas was a miss today, and him not being on the bench didn't help. But generally, we lack quality off the bench. I'm not even saying come start these expats, but I'm saying they should be on the bench. They should be in contention for the squad because these players bring something different. They bring a higher IQ that players develop from playing in tougher leagues, from coming through more challenging academies and environments. Players like Jilwan are just on a different ball game when it comes to footballing IQ. What do I mean by that? Because I've said it a few times. Well, I'm talking about when to pass the ball, when to hold the ball up, when to run into space, when to pass, when to shoot, how to shield the ball. A good example of how important that is towards the end of the game. Iran are 1-0 up. There's 2 minutes left, and the Iranian striker, how do you pronounce his name? Terami, is that correct?
Taremi, yeah.
Yeah. So he gets the ball. He goes out wide, and he holds the ball up very very well, causing Safat to issue a foul, and he wastes 2 minutes of the attack just through his hard work and his smart defensive positioning. He knew not to attack. If that was one of our players, they would have gone straight to the goal, even though that we're 1-0 up. Instead, their player took the ball, shielded it. He brought a foul from Safar, and he bought his team another 2 minutes to waste. So it was really a lesson for our players in terms of what level we need to go from here. Like what more we need to do. It was frustrating. Like there's so much more I want to talk about, but it was such a frustrating game because I think Iran were there for the taking. I don't know about you, Hassan, but I wasn't very impressed with them.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I mean, yeah, they're a good team, but today I would think a sharper team, some team that's sharper in attack, they would have punished them. And unfortunately, we couldn't do that. I think, they didn't threaten us too much. I think for the most part we had them. But with the counterattacks, like we couldn't make use of them at all. And there was a number of opportunities to build something, build an attack, but there was no link-up play. There's no, passing in attack. There's no movement. And it was just, Mohamed Ali by himself trying to create something. Bashar Rasen by himself trying to create something. And so, we could have, if we had a more intelligent way of attacking the ball, I think we could have done something. But unfortunately, we just couldn't.
The thing is, we talked about all the flaws with Katanec. But then again, like I said, he's done some good defensive work. I think he's taken Iraq definitely up a few levels from where we were when he first took over. But I think we need new ideas to come in. We have a new coach for the under-23. He's the former Bahraini coach. And he built the foundations for where Bahrain are as a team now. It's likely he's going to take over, unless we end up bringing in an Iraqi coach, which would be disgraceful, really, if I'm honest with you. And I hope that's not going to be the case. We've seen Iraq under the likes of Hakim Shakir, Yahya Alwan, Radi Shneshil, who I think gets a lot of criticism unfairly at times, and Akram Salman. All of them failed one after the other. And I don't think that the Iraqi FA would be stupid enough to make that same mistake, because we've just qualified for the next round, and if we hire an Iraqi coach, we might as well just resign or forfeit from the tournament altogether, because we have such a good opportunity to qualify for the World Cup now, and if we pick the right coach, if we actually bring in some expats, I think we're never going to get a better chance than this, if I'm honest with you. At least until they change the format of the World Cup, which could be very, very soon. Let's have a look at some of the players. I've looked at the teams that have qualified. I've looked at their rankings. The teams will be ranked in terms of like where they are in the FIFA rankings, and we'll probably have to choose amongst them. So most likely, so I'm gonna say the teams in the pots, and I want you, Hassan, to tell me out of the two teams who would you rather face, right? So Iraq in the next round, we'd have to face one of Japan or Iran. Who would you want to play?
I don't relish our matches against Iran, but I would say between the two, between them and Japan, I see it's much more likely that we can get a result against Iran rather than Japan. Japan is just, I think they're on another level than the other teams of Asia. I would say.
Yeah, agreed. I'd much rather play Iran. I think, like I said previously on Twitter, when you play Iran, I think the form goes out of the window, and it really comes down to who wants to win it more. Um, Iran didn't look particularly good today. They have not looked amazing across the 8 games in the World Cup group, and I think we'd have a very good chance of beating them, or at least getting one win and maybe a draw, or getting some points. I think Japan, you might as well just forget those games altogether. You're not going to get anything away from those games. Japan have looked very, very good. They've not had any tough games in their group, and they might be a bit rusty, but the Japan are Japan. They have the quality and the know-how to beat us pretty much every single time, home and away. Right. What about Australia or South Korea? Who do you want to get from those two?
Between the two, I'd say Australia right away.
Why?
I have not been impressed with their level for a while now, since the last Asian Cup, and maybe even before that a little bit. I think they're a team that we can get a result against, and we played them a number of times. I think we know them quite well. South Korea, we don't play them too much. It's just, I think we might be able to get something from South Korea, but I just feel more confident against Australia. It's between the two, it's tough, but I would just go with the team that I know better. So Australia.
I'm inclined to agree with you to an extent. I think Iraq can be Australia, a team that rely on physical presence, rely on long balls, and I don't think they're a particularly good team going forward either. But South Korea have looked very poor in the group. They've barely beaten the likes of Lebanon and the other weak teams in their group. And I think we can actually get wins against both South Korea and Australia. So I wouldn't be fussed either way. If I was to choose, I think maybe Australia. I think we could compete with them physically, and I don't think they'll particularly outplay us. Whereas I think South Korea on the ball would be better than us. So we probably won't be drawn with Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi would be the team that sits in our own pot. But then we might end up having to choose between Syria and Emirat or UAE. Who do you take from there?
Between Syria or
Emirat,
Emirat.
UAE. Yeah.
Between the two, I'd say Emirat. I think their level has been deteriorating for a number of years. Syria is just I think they're a pretty tough team. Over the last few years, they've been a good team. It's hard to say between the two, but I think I would just say Emirat. I think I'm more comfortable, more confident to get a result against them. We beat them not too long ago, so I think I'd go with them.
I've seen a few of Emirat's games, if I'm honest with you, and they have really turned things around in recent games. They've looked sharper, fitter, stronger. They've looked quite good going forward. So I'd go for Syria. I think Syria are an organised team, but I think you can play defensively against them and still get a win. But then again, if you play Emirat, and under Katanec at least, they're going to be more open to attack us, and that's going to leave a lot of gaps behind their defence, and I think we could exploit that. But if I had to pick, I'd play it safe and I'd say Syria. I don't think they have the attacking quality to actually to beat us. Then most likely it will be Oman or China. Who do you take from that?
I think I'd go with China.
Why?
just because we played against them quite often, and this is a trend. It's like I go to the teams mostly that I know best. Oman, they're not great. The results recently, I think they had a tight game with Bangladesh recently, so they are there. They would be there for the taking if we face them. But China isn't that much better. You know, I think I'd go with China just because I think their level just isn't there that they would be a threat to us.
I
And
think I think I agree with you in that situation as well. I think Oman are not particularly strong, but China, physically, we can outplay them, we can outmaneuver them, outmuscle them, and we can kind of, even if we don't play particularly well, you'd expect to get 6 points across those two games. Whereas Oman, you could see them being organised and getting maybe a draw or maybe even nicking a win if we make a mistake. But I'd go for China there. And then finally, who would you take, Vietnam or Lebanon?
I would go right away Lebanon. Vietnam, it's a team that they've been on the up for the last little while. They have good team, fast-paced players. They can attack. I think they would. And I remember as well, like our last Asian Cup match against them, where it was very, very, very tight, where we just barely grabbed the win with the free kick at the last second. So I think it would be a pretty tight game. As far as what I think right now is that Lebanon is probably one of the weakest teams left, possibly the weakest team left in this round. So I would go with them over Vietnam.
Agreed. Vietnam are a team that I think Iraq should really be looking at. They were a team that last few times we've played, we've battered them, but like gradually and slowly they've really been putting together minute improvements in their team, and I think right now they do look like a serious footballing nation, considering that football is not actually their national sport. So Iraq should really be looking at a team like Vietnam and thinking, do you know what? They're a country with limited budgets. Their players are nowhere near the caliber of Iraqi players. They have nowhere near the same level of expats or anything like that. And yet here they are competing with, let's say, the best of Asian football. What can Iraq take away from this? And how do we progress to the same degree that Vietnam have? So it's like, just looking at those names, the only country that I think we've got no chance against is Japan. The question is, do we have the consistency and the ability to play two games every round? Not every round, every international window, and win against one time Japan, Australia, or South Korea, and then following that playing the likes of China or Oman. Do we have the consistency? Do we have the quality? Do we have the fitness? I think the fitness is such an important area, and it's an area that we've really struggled with. I think the players really looked unfit recently, and I think there are parts of that down to the weather, the pitch, but also I think discipline as well is a big part of it. But going back to the main point that started off this entire dialogue, this is a very, very, very good chance for Iraq to qualify to the World Cup after how long has it been? 34, 5 years? It's long overdue, but we're going to have to work hard for this. This is not going to come easy. We need to work hard and actually earn our position in the next round. So we're going to have to wait and see, and hopefully we can finish in the top 4 positions. Otherwise, I think the 5th position's a bit of a stretch, because you have to play so many fixtures afterwards, and if you win all of those, then you qualify. So I think 5th position, forget about it. If we're not finishing top 4, then we can kiss all hopes of the World Cup goodbye. Final thoughts, Hassan, on this?
Yeah. These last few games have given us a lot to think about and a lot to consider about where we are at in terms of the national team. There's some time now to regroup and figure out, where are the areas that are going to need fixing ahead of the next final round, and hopefully action does get taken. And we'll see what happens as well as the situation develops with Katanec, and we're just gotta hope for the best.
Well, I'm hopeful in some areas and completely disillusioned in others. I think it's such a weird time to be an Iraqi football fan. I say this, but like I said at the start of this podcast, if you look back at where we were 4 or 5 years ago, there's no comparison. We've made so much progress, and I'm very grateful to Katanec for that. But going forward, there's so many question marks, and I just don't know where we stand with this. But do you know what? We're going to leave that there. I think there's so much more that can be said about Katanec, about Iraq, and what more to expect. But let's turn things upside down a little bit. Let's get Arya from GolBezan onto the show. Arya, first of all, let me just say congratulations on your victory today. It was frustrating to see, but I think you guys were the better team overall. And thank you for coming on our show.
Thanks for having me, mate. I appreciate the invitation. Obviously, we had you on our podcast as well. And yeah, it was a very stressful game for me personally. I got up at like 8 a.m. this morning to watch the game, and I wasn't feeling particularly good about it because I saw the lineup earlier on in the day, and I wasn't very happy with the fact that we were starting with our captain, actually, Ehsan Safi at left back. And just a couple of things I was really concerned about defensively for us, but it seemed like the coach got the sort of system right defensively anyway. And we won the game, which is the most important thing for our national team, was just to get to the next round of qualifiers and put a line through the problem we had in 2019 with the previous manager.
What did you think of the game today, first of all? Not just from an Iranian perspective, but let's talk about both sides here. What did you make of the quality that both sides demonstrated? Do you think Iran deserved the win? Do you think Iraq were very poor? Were they unlucky? Let's have a frank conversation about this.
Well, I think Iran, first and foremost, they created a lot of chances in this game. Especially in the second half, we created 3 or 4 clear-cut chances we couldn't take. But I think ultimately, we deserved to win the game based on the fact that we were the team that was looking to score goals. We were able to get through the Iraqi defence and create chances. So I do think we deserved to win the match based on that. However, if you're asking me on the quality of the game itself, I don't think we played well. I mean, Jahan Bakhsh, the guy who plays in Brighton and Hove Albion, and he was absolutely awful today for the national team. I thought he was horrendous on the left-hand side. There was problems, a couple of times we kept giving the ball away, and Iraqi players counter-attacking, as I told you, did that a couple of times in the first half. However, overall, considering the pitch we were playing on, I thought Iraq really, they struggled to get the ball forward to their attacking players. I also thought Iran couldn't keep the ball for long. A lot of times they were resorting to the immediate long ball to the strikers. The first half was very boring to watch, no doubt about it. Second half was a little bit more lively for both sides, especially when Iran had scored their goal. Even Iraq were starting to get some attacks in. I don't think the quality was so bad, again, considering the pitch conditions. However, Iran by far, they could have done a lot better. I was very impressed with Iran midfield though. I thought we did get a lot of tackles and a lot of turnovers, which was quite impressive to see, something we hadn't really done against Bahrain. But yeah, I was also quite surprised by how unfit the Iraqi players were. They didn't seem to be able to sustain the energy levels throughout the whole full 90 minutes. But yeah.
Let me ask you something a bit cheeky, but that first half handball, was that a penalty or not?
Remind me.
when Safat takes a shot. I think it was Safat. He takes a shot from outside the box and it hits the Iranian defender's left arm. And did I? Am I being unfair when I say that was a clear penalty?
No, I mean, listen, the replays were actually quite bad. They didn't give a good replay of it. If they'd given a better replay, it would have been nice to see exactly where it hit the defender. I do feel like he was keeping his elbows quite close to his body, so that immediately means that he's not making his body bigger. Whether or not he was extending it in front of him, I couldn't tell because he was turning away from the camera. So
diplomatic answer, fair play.
No, but also I will say there was a couple of times where the Iranian players probably could have got sent off. For example, Katanec got a yellow card in the game, and then he kicked the ball away in the second half, and he could have easily got a second yellow for that.
I don't want to mention it. I think there were times where the game did get heated. Yeah. There was that time.
Also, I have to say, if I'm being cheeky as well, just for the balance, the Iraqi players certainly playing up to the referee's books, 100%. I mean, a few times, nothing in it, and they were still making a meal of the tackles. Which, listen, I know they have to do that as part of the game. You have to make sure you're being competitive, but I do feel like a few times there were a couple of things going that I don't even think Iraq got a yellow card in this game, did they?
I think we did get one or two,
yeah,
but that's to be expected.
Iran certainly, I think were the more aggressive team, so I think I understand why they got so many yellow cards. And yeah, you're right. Things could have gone really wrong for Iran if the referee kind of wanted to be a little bit more strict. But
yeah.
Luckily.
I mean, that it's football at the end of the day. But I tweeted something after the game. I got a lot of abuse from Iranian fans who weren't happy with it. But I want to ask you what your thoughts are on this. I wrote that based on today's performance, I don't think Iran or Iraq deserve to qualify to the World Cup. Do you disagree with the statement? Do you think it's a fair assessment? Or do you think it's somewhere in between or too early to tell?
Well, Iran, up until a month ago, a lot of the fans were suggesting that we wouldn't even get 12 points this month. And based on the way the fans were speaking about the team, the negativity towards the entire coaching staff, I do feel like Iran, first and foremost, deserves some credit for the way they bounced back, for the way they've managed to come out of all this kind of, because we could have easily got the hosting for this. We didn't even get a home game against Iraq and Bahrain. So a lot of things went against us for sure, and I feel like this national team is our strongest when it comes to personnel. Now, whether or not Skocic has done enough to create the right formula for this team to progress to the World Cup, it's very hard to answer, because I think he's only had 7 games in charge of the national team, whereas the Iraqi coach has had a lot of, he's been there for a long time. So based on just having 7 games, he's only played 3 friendlies before these 4 matches. I can give him a lot of praise for that. It's very hard to prepare your team when you've only seen them 3 times, up until, So I get what you're saying. Based on this match, you could say, yes, Iran didn't play so well. But I take in factors like the pitch condition. Again, the game against Hong Kong, we got exact same performance, whereas the game against Bahrain, we played really, really well.
Of course, there's always different factors, but you make an interesting point.
I think what you're saying is correct to some extent, but I don't think Iran will struggle in the next phase. I think what will happen is they'll find it a lot more competitive than they have found it over the last 8 years.
Yeah, I think you raise a very interesting point, Arya, in terms of how a manager could come in very quickly and completely overhaul a team that's struggling. And it's kind of part of the discussion we were having earlier with Katanec, who seems to be on his way out for. Well, there's rumours that he's leaving after this game, and I think the turnaround that Iran have had from their previous manager to now is quite phenomenal. He's managed to turn things around in only 7 games, and you won 4 games back to back, didn't you? This last qualifying round. So yeah, essentially 3 games of preparation. It has been enough for him to actually change things round and get Iran from looking pretty much out of it to topping the group and being one of the highest seeds in the next round of qualifiers. So it really shows you how much an impact a good manager can have on the squad. I want to ask you, Arya, very quickly, who do you think, and you might say nobody, but who do you think from that Iraq squad that you faced today played particularly well, or is there anyone that stood out, or anyone that you thought just looked atrocious? Because it's always good to get an outsider's perspective of our squad.
The goalkeeper. The goalkeeper made a couple of really good saves. He kept the score, let the score down. I said in the second half, someone Qudus had a clear chance. Sadar Osman had a clear chance, and he made some good saves. I thought he was quite good. I thought he was quite stable. Who did I think was really bad? I said this to you before. I thought Mohamed Ali looked very tired.
Mohamed, the Mimi, the striker.
Yeah. I thought he looked very tired. I thought he looked very jaded throughout the match, and it was quite surprising because I've always had a good impression of him as a very top quality striker, especially in Asia. I feel like he's a player who can really. I think he was in Portugal for a little while, but I think he can go back to Europe and do quite well. However, in this game, he did seem a little bit tired, and I'd like to see more from him. Personally, he's very young, and I think he's a player who, can really help Iraq become a much better team in Asia, because they have some very good players. Safa Hadi, for me, is a fantastic midfielder. I really like watching him play. I think he's actually a kind of player that Iran need. I'd like, if he was Iranian, I would love to have him in the squad for Iran. Or Atwan as well. Seems like quite an important player for you guys. He seems to be quite important in that midfield. Ali Adnan for me is a guy who obviously he was in Udinese in the Italian Serie A, but like you said, he's not played in a long time. However, he's a very important player for Iraq. I don't know if necessarily playing him as a left wing back is what he needs anymore. I think because he's such a good technical player, he has such good delivery, his passing is quite good. I think he's quite physically strong. I would say, and this is just my idea, I would like to see him play in the midfield. Because I think you guys are probably needing of a strong passer of the ball. Someone with a good left foot. I think if you play him in midfield, I think he would do quite well for you guys. He doesn't have to run around too much. All he has to do is just pass the ball well, keep it. I think he would do well there. I don't know if he's the guy to play at left wing back, because he seems to have lost the pace and the energy.
Yeah, I think with Ali Adnan, it's an interesting observation. It's definitely something I can see happening in the future as he goes a bit older, using his vision, using his technique in terms of passing the ball from a deeper position as a kind of like a Pirlo role. I think right now he does look overweight. He does look unfit, but I think part of that is because he's not been able to train with his club because of visa restrictions in the MLS. Because he's based in Canada and his squad are playing in America due to COVID reasons. So he's been without training regularly for nearly 3 months. So it's partly down to that.
I was a big fan of him, and I'm an AC Milan fan. I was a huge fan of him when he was at Udinese. I was very impressed with how he played. So hopefully his career starts to progress a little bit further.
Yeah, hopefully. Final thoughts then. Do you think Iraq and Iran, do you think they'll qualify to the next round, as in like from to the World Cup, or do you think that given the competitors that we're going to most likely face, the likes of South Korea, Australia, Do you think it's going to be a tough ask?
I mean, Hassan, you're asking the $1 million question.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Because here's my thing, right? I believe the Iranian squad is good enough to qualify for the World Cup. I'm not saying that from an Iranian fan perspective. I tend not to take that stance. You know,
If it makes you feel any better, I agree with you. I think Iran look very good. I think player for player, pound for pound, Iran look very good.
Look at the front three: Sardar Azmoun, Taremi, and Khorizadeh. In my opinion, those three are some of the best players right now playing in European football, not just in Asia. There's Khorizadeh is absolutely tearing it up in the Belgian league. Osman destroying the Russian league, and Taremi destroying the Portuguese league.
And the Champions League.
And the Champions League. So I think we have a good front three, and you've also got players like Salman Ghoddos playing in the Premier League, Jahan Bash, Qayyadi. So we have a lot of good attacking players. Our only issue is our defence. You know, Carlos Queiroz spent years trying to develop the Iranian defence because it was one of the things that we always lacked, with a good, solid centre back. And you know, slowly we're getting there. We've built some good players around the team. I think we can make the next World Cup, personally, and I think the Qatar World Cup is the only World Cup the Iranian national team shouldn't miss out on, because it's a perfect opportunity for Iraq. Because playing in Qatar, you know, it's close to home, you know, it's in the winter, so it's not as warm. If Iran can qualify to the Qatar World Cup, then I feel like we can do really well, you know, in that competition. For Iraq, I think they have a very good chance if they like we were saying on our podcast, if they can start to bring in some of these players who are playing abroad, some of these players that are playing in Europe, maybe finding some players who maybe they haven't found already, who are dual nationality, maybe someone's grandparents Iraqi, and you know, could play for Iraq. Because I'm sure there's a lot in even in League One Championship. I'm sure there's a lot of players who have heritage. And that's what Queiroz did for Iran, and that's one of the reasons why you see so many players that are dual nationality playing for the national team, is because they looked for that very early on.
It's so interesting seeing the dynamics between Iraq and Iran. So, for example, Iran going forward seem to be a very, very good team. On the other hand, you have Iraq, who defensively seem to be sound, but going forward we have a real lack of quality and a lot of question marks left to be answered.
Yeah. And you know, I think Bashar is a fantastic player. I think again, why is he not playing in Europe? Why is he still playing in Asia? It's one of my biggest pet peeves, when you have players even like Omar Abdulrahman, Mehi Torabi playing for us. So many of these players are talented in Asia, but they don't make that move, and it really bothers me, because Asian football always had this stigma behind it, saying, "Oh, these players are looking for money," you know, and it becomes that, and it's a shame, because why is Resan leaving Persepolis, a top team in Asia, okay, for Qatar SC? Come on, man.
I think there's so many factors in terms of why these things happen. I think part of it comes down to financial reasons. I think with Iraqi football, a lot of it comes down to fear of failure. So, for example, look at Safar. He's moved to Russia. He's struggled to really have any impact and get many games. Part of that is down to injury. Mimi, on the other hand, he moved from Qatar to Portugal. He struggled. Ala Abbas is in Portugal right now. He got injured, but he's had his own issues.
Sorry to interrupt you. You say they struggled, but this is the thing. A lot of our players struggled as well when they moved to Europe. In fact, if you go back and watch our players that went to Europe for the first time, a lot of them didn't play for their clubs. Sardar Azmoun is a good example of that. He didn't play for Rubin Kazan for 2 years. But the thing is, I always say this: even if you're not playing, the fact you're training at a top club or even a top facility with good coaches, that is enough, in my opinion, for a footballer for a team like Iraq anyway. Because a team like Iraq, they don't need to have players playing in the Iraqi league, the Qatari league. You know, those clubs don't have any difference in quality in training anyway. Ultimately, you want players that are getting the top level training they come into the Iraqi national camp and say, "Look, I'm doing it at this top level against top level, teammates." And yes, okay, he's not playing, but eventually they will. I'm sure they will. The problem I think is they won't. They're not willing to stick at it. They're not willing to put a bit of desire into it.
Yeah, so I think this is a key thing, man, and I think Iraq, I hate to say it, we need to be looking at Iran as a model and looking at how Iran operate. Iran, by the way, they have their own issues in terms of the FA.
Iran aren't perfect either.
Yeah,
Iran
exactly.
Are still not perfect.
Exactly,
100%.
exactly. But as a model, as a framework in terms of how we go forward, I think Iran are a very, very similar boat to where we are. They face similar issues, and I think we need to really develop our strategy based on what Iran have gone through, and we learn from the mistakes that they've made. But it comes down to, number one, how much the FA wants to actually contribute towards the national team and limit the amount of corruption and all sorts of negligence that happens. It comes down to the players' mentality as well, There are so many issues. Hassan, go on.
Yeah, sorry. Jumping in on this exact same topic is, I think it's a difference of culture as well. Look, we don't have this culture of having Iraqi players going to Europe and then sticking it out and winning a spot with their team. It's very, very tough. Like Ali Adnan, he went there. He went to Udinese. He went to Turkey. He tried to. He made a decent career for himself in Europe, and until he went to MLS. But aside from him, you don't really have that. That history of players going there and trying their hand. You have a lot of players. Traditionally we always go to Qatar, and they have an easy life. You get a salary, and that's that.
Yeah, I think that the player that comes to mind, for example, in the 90s, is a player like Ali Daei going to Bayern Munich, and kind of setting that standard of a player going to Europe and letting future generations know what's possible. We've only recently had that with Ali Adnan going to Udinese, and like, with all due respect to Ali Adnan and Udinese, that's a completely different ballpark to going to Bayern Munich. So I think these things do take time, but the truth is football doesn't wait for you.
Another thing, just and last on that, I think you were speaking about like obviously Ali Daei to Bayern Munich, but I still disagree with the thing that yes, there's no culture, that it hasn't happened. I'm sure, for example, I'm sure Atwan could get an offer from a team in, let's just say, the Cypriot league, for example, and I'm sure, 100% sure, he would play regularly in that league. By the way, the Cypriot league's pretty good. Don't get me wrong; they're not amazing, but they're pretty good. And I'm sure, and I guarantee you, the Cypriot league, the team that they qualify for the Conference League. They play at a good level. That's what they need to be aiming for. Can we get into these, can we kind of break our Iraqi players into these, the Cypriot league, the Slovakian league? As when you start to do that, what happens is you build these scouts that come out, and that's what happened with Iranian players. Iranian players start to move up to these very minor countries in Europe, and eventually you got players like Taremi. Now he's playing in Porto. You got Osman with the Rubin Kazan. Now he's playing in Zenit. So it happens. I think that's the problem. Something has to tick. A few players have to leave for it to start to work.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at it like this, things are slowly starting to change for us. Like, we're seeing, some players, Muhammad Ali and Al Abbas, like, they're trying their luck in Portugal. Didn't work so well for Muhammad Ali, and I expect he'll probably go back at some point to Europe. I think he's good enough for it. But the thing is, slowly you're seeing some changes, but then at the same time you have it's the long, amount of time where, the players, they don't see the success of other Iraqi players doing there. So it's something that takes some time to change and to improve on this side. And then you have as well another consideration. It's easy for us to scoff at the decision for some of these players for going to the Gulf leagues for money, but then at the same time you consider a lot of these guys, they're coming from very, very poor backgrounds where they can't if the decision is to go to play in the second division of some European League and try your luck, or go to the UAE or Qatar and get, a guaranteed salary. For some of these guys, they're going to weigh the benefits and they're going to choose an easier lifestyle closer to home, no big change in culture. So that's something it's going to take a while for us to move past it. And hopefully things are changing and moving in that direction. And we'll see from there.
Guys, I could sit here all day and talk to you guys about football, but unfortunately we're hitting the hour 15-minute mark here, so I'm gonna unfortunately have to stop us. But just want to say one more time, and I hate to say this, but congratulations, we've both made it through. Arya, thank you so much for joining. I really do appreciate your continued support, to be a friend of the podcast, and just to have you on the show. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
No, thanks very much for having me on. Listen, I consider this podcast like the cousin podcast of GolBezan. And you've done a lot of help for us as well the past couple of weeks, and I appreciate it. So hopefully we can do something if we get in the same group in the next round. Hopefully we can do it again.
Hopefully, definitely. Hassan, thank you also so much. We talked so much today, and I'm sure we're gonna be back following the next round if we happen to be in the same group as Iran. Arya, you have to join us as well. Hassan, we'll see you next time as well. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks. Pleasure speaking to both of you today.
Pleasure's all ours. Guys, thank you so much. If you want to get in touch, find me on Twitter at Iraq Football Podcast. My Instagram is at Iraq Football Podcast. Arya, just before you leave, where can we get in touch with you?
You can find my podcast, GolBezan, GolBezan, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you want to find my personal account, just Arya_Alaverdi on Twitter and on Instagram as well.
And Hassan, you?
Yeah, primarily on Twitter, Hassan O_1193.
Okay, guys. Well, we'll be back very, very soon. I think the draw is either on the 24th of June, or it's been moved a bit further. But whenever the draw is, we will be back, and hopefully the draw is in our favour. But guys, it's not the end of the world. Iran won today, probably the better team. We're through to the next round, so plenty to look forward to. Until then, ladies and gents, Yalla ya Iraq.